Good morning. Welcome to the River Church. We are grateful that you are here with us this morning. Things might look a little bit different. You are worshiping from the comfort of your home today, but we are all gathered together and we are worshiping the same God. So we thank you for joining us. We're excited for what God is going to do through this service. Today we are blessed to hear from our brother in Christ, Mike McCarthy, with his Real People, Real Jesus story. But first, what we're going to do is worship in song. So I just encourage you to hit the pause button on this video and either go to the links on our Facebook page for our Spotify worship songs, or head to the weekly email that we sent out earlier in the week and just worship Jesus with those first three songs. And then we'll be back with you in just a few minutes.
Good morning, church. How nice is it for you to invite us into your living room this morning or to take a ride along with you in your car? Isn't it wonderful that technology is such as it is, that we don't have to meet in a building, actually have a place to actually meet, but we can do something such as this morning to still gather together and do everything that we would normally do on a Sunday morning. What I love most about our gathering on Sunday mornings is our time of prayer, and not just prayers of the people, but our practice of the spiritual discipline of confession. God is so gracious. He extends his grace to us even when we don't deserve it, and that there is no way that we can actually earn it. But our practice of confession actually restores the bond between us and God that we have broken when we commit sin. So his grace is all over us this morning as we spend some time just going before God to confess those things that we have done to sin against him and the bonds that we've broken by doing that. So we just spend some quiet time this morning asking God to speak to us in our spirits as we speak to him and share those things in our time of quiet confession. Thank you, O God, for your grace and your mercy, and for your unending and unwavering love for us that would invite us into your presence to ask for your forgiveness. And when we do that, then you just answer our prayers and restore us into the full and rich relationship with you that you so desire and that we so desperately need. So we thank you, God, this morning, and we pray all of these things in your beautiful name, Lord. Amen. One of the most important segments of our Sunday morning gathering is our prayers of the people. And just because we are not gathering together today does not mean that we won't be lifting up prayer requests and praises. You do still have opportunity to do so. So if you go to your phone or your computer and you go to theriverdelavan.com, when you enter that in, you'll see this little icon up at the top. If you click on that, it gives you the drop-down menu for prayer. When you press that, if you scroll up, it gives you a place for name, email, and then your prayer request can be entered in there. These prayer requests will come to me, and I will be able to disseminate them into our All In Connection and get those out to our powerful prayer warriors so that we can participate in both prayer requests and the praises of our people. There are just a few short announcements that we want to let you in on before we go to our Real People, Real Jesus message this morning. The first is on the River Delavan website, there's an opportunity to pay your tithing online. If you go to that same drop-down menu, it says Give, and then there will be a short tutorial on how to set up your payment online. Next is our next Feeding 50, which is October 23rd. So please just mark your calendar for that. And then after that, on October 29th, we will hold our annual business meeting. This will be held right after service on Sunday. This will be where we are discussing our budget and also to vote on any elder nominations that have come in and share pertinent information for us regarding the church moving forward.
It has been a privilege to have the opportunity to introduce all of our real people, real Jesus stories. And today's story, it's an extra special opportunity for us to hear from Mike McCarthy. When Patty asked Mike if he would be willing to record his story, he was so excited about it, and he started to write down everything that he wanted to share with all of us. And he showed up to record it with enthusiasm, and having a behind the scenes look at Patty and Mike's sister and just how they interacted with one another was probably one of the most beautiful things that Tony and I have seen. And Mike has had some interesting challenges, and he has had some big transitions in his life. But what remains the same is his love for Jesus. And we're just so excited that you are able to hear his real people, real Jesus story. So please join me in welcoming Mike McCarthy.
I grew up on the south side of Chicago, where I was born in 1954. It was a good time for me, and I had many fond memories playing outside, which I wish today's kids did more of. Mom and Dad were believers, although Dad worked 2 jobs to support me and my sisters and one younger brother. I'm happy that all my sisters are believers. Mom was a strong woman of faith also, but when she got pregnant in 1949 with my older sister Jan, I followed 5 years later. Then in quick succession came 3 more sisters, Betsy, Donna, and Barbie. We had many happy years in Chicago before deciding to move to Wisconsin in 1967. When our neighborhood began to change, racial unrest was beginning. As soon as we settled in, Mom began looking for a church. Someone suggested Calvary, so that is where we went first. When I turned 18, I left home and traveled a little and explored life. I always missed Wisconsin. Not long after, I wanted to return back to Wisconsin. One funny note I remember is going downstairs after service to have coffee and donuts. I would sneak back upstairs and go down each aisle, picking up the plastic cup and communal wine and drinking the last few dregs. I wandered for years before God called me home, and we found Lakeland Church. When Lakeland kept growing, we decided to look for a new church. When we found the River of Life, we knew God called us here.
We certainly did. We certainly did.
Yeah.
And so when we were married, I already had one daughter, Sarah, and then we had 2 more children, Kyle and Megan. And as we grew, then that's when the trouble kind of started, when I was having issues. And when Sarah told us about what had happened to her at that camp. And we ultimately were divorced. And during that time, I remember that we were both attending Community Reformed Church. And on my weekends, I would go to church with the kids and sit on this side. And then the next weekend, Mike would have the kids at church and sit on this side. But looking back now, we always kept going to church. We kept attending church. Even though we weren't together, we kept attending the same church that we had attended as a couple. And then, do you remember when we got back together?
What specifically?
When God said to me,
marry this man. So she called me up and told me God told me to marry you, and I think she had gotten her help and her assistance and healing, and so I said absolutely. I did not want to be apart from her. Never planned that, and so we were happily remarried. It's been a joy ever since.
yes.
God has been good.
Yes. And then we went through a little bit of a hard time again when we lost Sarah.
Yeah.
And that was a struggle
It's a struggle.
for both of us.
Yeah, very much
And
struggle.
that's when we decided I decided that Lakeland Church was too big.
Yeah.
It was difficult for us. And you were willing to leave Lakeland Church with me.
Yes. Yeah, you know, funny thought, we often look at, we like to see lots of fellow believers, and so why wouldn't you want to be in a large church with many other Christians surrounding you? But for us, it was that heart that we felt we found in a smaller group. And so when Lakeland got so big, that when I started attending there, or we started attending there, it was 100 people. And when it got to be going into the hundreds, and when we ultimately left, it was somewhere around 1,000. And so we bounced around at a few visits, and finally came into this place. I think you were already out of the movie theater.
We started going when they were in.
Briefly, yeah, at the movie theater. And then we ended up coming here, and this has been our home forever, since then, anyway.
Yes.
So,
Do you know what it was about the river that drew us to it? The fact that it was small.
oh, yeah,
and that it
that's
was-
why. We were
yeah.
looking for a nice, a family, a small family with a heart. It was more family-like, by all means. You know, it wasn't the hustle and bustle of a large church.
It was, yeah, definitely more about the people
Yeah,
and the lives of the people
definitely.
and how everybody was doing and interacting with each other. Yes. And then there was a particular Sunday morning when I looked at you and I said, "This is our new church." And you told me that. You saw me smile. I hadn't smiled for quite some time.
Yeah.
And then we were happy at the river.
One story he had mentioned a few times was during COVID, when your church would meet in the parking lot
Car
in cars
church.
Yeah.
and celebrate together that
Oh,
way.
it was
And
tough. It was difficult.
yes, it was
to
hard,
do,
but how
we
they
were,
would all
we were
come.
able to do it.
Yeah.
Do you remember being in, do you recall when we were in the car?
Yes.
We would come to the church
Yeah.
and the sermons were put through the radio.
Yeah.
We would turn on our radio station.
How
Yeah.
fun.
It
And
was unique.
I think it was Rachel that would come around and put communion on everybody's windshield so we could still take communion together.
It was like drive-up church.
It was
Drive
great.
up
Yeah,
church.
and instead of clapping, everybody would
Honk their horns.
honk their horns. And it was it was wonderful that this church found a way to keep meeting
Even in the most difficult circumstances.
and still in person,
Yeah.
face to face. I think that was real important, kept us
Yeah.
going,
Definitely.
definitely. And now we have a family here.
Yeah.
Feel like we have a church family here. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought was really important for you in your life, Mike, was such a passion for the men of God. You've always had such a heart for the men of God and cared so much for the men of God. And when you started the Iron Man group through Lakeland, and eventually there were men coming from a variety.
All other churches, yeah, we recently ended after 21 years. And I thought over the years, when I had a list of the guys who had attended, it was somewhere in 45 to 50 men. But at one time, there was never, in one season, there was never more than 10 to 12. But over the course of 40 years, if you added up all the guys who had attended, it was in the 40s. So I think of that camaraderie and that sharing of men in fellowship, men amongst men talking about what God has done in their lives was just incredible. And what we got from one another. You know, iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another. So that's been something I've tried to live by.
And to this day, some of the men in that group talk about Mike's impact in their lives or his willingness to sit with them or go through really difficult times with them, divorces and illnesses and loss of job. And he was the man that they would come to. He was the man that they would look to. He was a man that they would come to for advice and support and encouragement. Because that's how God gifted him.
You too, honey, though.
In a way to just help and support you know, couples, marriages. That's something we've done as well.
Yeah.
But specifically for you, I think the men was really your passion and your heart for the men of God.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. And now that we're attending the river, we are still loving that it's small and personable, and walk through the doors, and you can just sense Jesus here, and you can just feel the presence of the Holy Spirit when we're walking in, and when we're singing, and when we're praising, and the whole morning.
It's all here.
It's all here. It's all here. It's all here. And we're very grateful that this church, actually, we're very grateful that this church is small, because it makes it much easier for us to continue to attend as a couple, which is wonderful. It's with Mike living in Genoa City now, it's nice that I can drive and pick you up and be back in time to still be at church together.
I didn't think of that.
I think it's a blessing that
Very much of a blessing.
you're not in Green Bay.
Yeah.
I don't have to drive to Green Bay, that you're closer, and that we can continue to be here as a couple.
Yeah.
And continue to, can you talk about that, what that's like for you?
Yeah, that definitely was a God thing, because we had only two choices in Wisconsin, was Genoa City or Green Bay. So Green Bay, that would have been an impossibility, literally for Patty, unless she needed an extended stay, like a vacation. So I'm so grateful that other opportunities were available, or made available. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Definitely God doing.
Yeah. And your life now today is, how would you feel in that sentence?
Well, he's still working in it, but it's far from ended or complete. You know, I'm working hard to still be the man he wants me to be, and the dad he wants me to be. I have challenges with our daughter Megan, as a single mom, and that brings up its own challenges. We're lucky to be able to watch our grandson so many days a week. And Patty's carrying that weight for now, more often, of course, than I. But that's been a real blessing too, with having Megan, and our son Kyle is doing awesome. My sadness is that both of them are not believers. Megan, oddly enough, showed us her faith as a child, young child. I still have a New Testament Bible at home with her name in it, but that went away. So I don't know whether it was a heart thing or a head thing. You know what I mean? And God, you know, maybe it wasn't. It was just maybe feelings instead of a heart. But so I certainly hope he still continues to work in her life, and I'm sure he will. But we keep showing. I wrote her a long letter recently telling her how much I loved her. I thought I had to do that because I do. So it's not like it was a difficult thing to do, but it was. I felt it important to do. That she knew how much I loved her. That as a single mom, it's got to be so challenging, and she has an ulterior lifestyle that I don't approve of. So, but she had to know that nothing can separate us from loving her. Nothing can take us apart from loving her. And so I wrote this letter that I sent to her saying that she means so much to me, and I love her so much, and I'm very proud of her. And Kyle too. Kyle's left his faith, never showed any, and he moved out to Oregon. So we were fortunate to blessed with travel there and visit him a few times. And then he moved to Michigan to be closer to home. And I'll never forget when he told us he was leaving home to wander, to go find his way in the world. And I said, wonderful, and I hope you're gonna get a good start. That's what I did. And then when he was leaving one day in his car, and he's leaving and waving, I said, he said, where are you going to be going? He said, Oregon. And I said, well, I thought you were going to be leaving home for like Indiana. He said, you're going to Oregon? And he said, yes, Dad. And I'm like, oh my God. So, funny-wise, we were able to go and visit him a few times, which was a blessing. I went by myself a couple of times to house sit for them. They have a dog named John. And so I
When they were in
sat.
Grand Rapids?
When they were in Grand Rapids.
Yes, you did.
And John's passed away, but I was able to go there and house sit for a few times. But so and Kyle's very successful now. He's a chef. He was hired by an assisted living place in Grand Rapids, and he worked there for a few years. And then he saw an ad in the local paper for another assisted living place that has over 500 residents. And so he decided to go there and look at that job, even though he was very happy at the position he was already in at a smaller existing living place. And they offered him the job, called him up a few days later and said, we'd like to offer you the job. And it's $75,000 a year. So here's a young man who, although he doesn't know Jesus, he's what we traditionally hear from the old days, a self-made man. That he was able to use the talents given to him by God and put them to use in making a life for himself. So I'm so happy for him. I wish in my heart of hearts that both him and Megan were believers, and I'm just going to trust the Lord and pray for them every day that they become believers, as Tony, you alluded to with your son, I believe. And I can feel that in your mama's heart, that we want our children to become believers too. And so I'm going to continue to pray for both Megan and Kyle that happens. God stirs in them again.
The prayer about the hound of heaven, you would tell me, I'm praying that the hound of heaven chases them down.
Yeah.
The hound of heaven is going to chase them down.
Yeah.
And do what it takes to bring them back around.
Yeah.
Aside from taking them.
Yeah. Aside from hurting them, whatever he has to do to get them.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
For them to see the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as it isn't dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe it could be.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. But they have seen through us that you can go through really hard times and come through stronger and with a more genuine faith that's really true and deep in our hearts. They've seen that through us. They've seen us at the worst and they've seen us at our best. And so they know that there's always hope for them. And we will continue, of course, to continue to pray that the hound of heaven chases them down and brings them back around. Yeah, that would be right. And now that we are at this point in our life and living separately, and yet the commitment in our marriage, we've talked a lot about that, how sound it is, strong, and that God brought our marriage back together. Therefore, nobody can take it apart, no matter what happens to us. And that we will continue to honor that and be a team.
You betcha.
Yes. Yes.
A great story. And it still continues.
Yes. He still has a purpose. He still has a plan for us. And we're just going to try to patiently wait and see what he brings next for us.
But I mentioned the wine.
Did you mention the wine?
Yeah.
About drinking the wine in
Yeah.
the church?
Yeah.
You did.
Oh.
When you were a little kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
You did. That was your first introduction to the church,
Yeah.
drinking the cups.
And then we got picked up by a bus, school bus, and driven about 6 blocks to church. And then we get out of the bus and go down to church. I remember the services, but I specifically don't remember the pastor or the sermons, of course. But then after service, we go downstairs. It was a big church, and get coffee and donuts. And I'd run up the stairs with another kid, and we'd go down the aisles back and forth like this, and pick up the plastic cups and drink the dregs of the communal wine back and forth.
Yes, you did.
And and then the bus, we go outside and get back on the bus and go right back to our neighborhood and get dropped off again. So it was great.
And then you would go home and watch the movies of Samson.
Oh, that's a good one. I love big time movies. Samson and Delilah. I don't know if you ladies know the stars. Victor Mature and Hedy Lamarr. They have any note for you? Tony says yes, and Rachel no. That's unfortunate. So's your age.
Anyway.
But anyway, so Samson and Delilah and the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston. That's a biggie. And so at that time, though, in my youth, I looked at those as movies about strong men. It wasn't about men of faith. It was that Samson was He-Man, and he could kick you know what, and it had nothing to do with his faith and God working in his heart. So that was a revelation to me that years later I was able to put all that together into how God had shaped and made these men for a purpose and used their weaknesses to turn them into strength.
I think back then is when your compassion for men and godly men maybe was coming from watching these men on screen who were brave and strong in spite of fear or uncertainty and did what they thought was best. Yeah.
So anyway, so we moved here in 1967.
Yeah.
And started going to Calvary. But it was much smaller then, but it quickly started growing. And after a time, it got what we thought too big, so we left. And I left the church, and at 18, I moved out of home. And for 1 year, I don't know if you ladies would remember, Rachel certainly wouldn't because you're too young, but Wisconsin was 18 for drinking for 1 year. And it lasted for just 1 year in 1972, I think. And then they saw that that was a bad decision politically to have kids driving around at 18. And so they dropped that one. But but anyway, so Mom wanted us to go to church, and Dad was a non-practicing Catholic, as I like to call him. He just had too much on his plate. He was a Chicago fireman and a carpet layer, and when you work 2 jobs, it puts great stress on your marriage and on your family life. But I was blessed differently than Jan. I got to go to the fire station with him and go on fire runs, and I'd sit in the cab of the fire truck, and he would take me out of the fire truck and put me in a chief's car, which is like a glorified ambulance, and I'd watch the firemen putting out the hoses on water on fire, putting all the fire out, and then we'd go back to the station and hang up the hoses in these tall towers and let the water drain from them, and they dry out. And so I got to go in these neighborhoods that were not very safe, and over a few years they got worse and worse until my dad told me that I couldn't go anymore, and I was pretty saddened, and I'd say, why? And he didn't want to tell me until I was an adult, but at the movie theater we were going to, we would go in and sit down and watch it, and the black people would take a can opener and poke you in the back of the head with it. It sounds terrible, and I hate to bring up a horrible story like that, but that's the truth. My dad said it was pretty gruesome, but it was a neighborhood that had just turned bad. And so a relative of mine was going to medical school to become an eye doctor, and he was up here in Wisconsin going to school, and he had rented a house, and he had done this for a few summers. And then 1 year they were getting extended exams and going to graduate, and he couldn't take the home. So he called my mom and dad and said, would you and Ada, my mom, like the house with the kids? And they said, absolutely. So I didn't want to come up here though because I saw a kid in cutoffs, and I thought he was a sissy. I said, you ain't getting me, I'm a city boy, you ain't getting me in cutoffs. And so we moved up here, and once I started wearing cutoffs, I said,
By the end of the summer.
This is like Tarzan. This was great. And so we moved up here, and I could go in stores with bare feet. There was a store in the Bay that was an ice cream shop, and you could go in there with bare feet and your cutoffs, and they didn't yell at you. I thought that was unbelievable. It was just great. So Williams Bay was a wonderful place back then. It's gotten much more, tougher. Although it hasn't grown as much as Lake Geneva, it's still a very small community. It still has its small size, and it's just a beautiful little town. Williams Bay is still a gorgeous little community.
And we're so fortunate that you have great memories of those days.
Yeah.
And that you were introduced to Calvary Church, that there was a nice Christian church
Yeah.
that you were able to start going to. And yeah,
Thanks to Mom.
thanks to your mom.
Yeah. She
So-
struggled a bit, but
Yeah.
got it done.
Yeah. So God has been kind of intertwined through your life for so long. Even when you didn't know it or realize it, He was always there, looking out for us and looking out for you.
And
Yeah.
even when we were apart, we still attended.
The same church.
I'd have the kid I would be with the kids one week and be with the kids the other week.
And then other people in church thought we were, couldn't figure out what was wrong with
It's
those
loony,
McCarthys.
loony, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It was pretty funny.
yeah,
When you think about it.
yeah. But we did it,
We made,
and we made it.
we made do.
Yep, and then God said, no, you guys are supposed to be together. So we're gonna make that happen again.
So it went.
That is how it went. And now here we are today.
So I talk about the dregs of wine, right?
Yes, you did. Are you good?
Yes, I'm done.
What a beautiful story, right? One of the things that stood out to me the most in Mike McCarthy's Real People, Real Jesus testimony was that as a small child, he was so drawn to the biblical characters and the strength that they had. And as a kid, he just thought they were cool because they were strong guys. But as he has grown in his faith and he has grown in maturity, he understands that God was preparing his heart from very early on to not only want to model that in his life, but then to draw on the strength that God provided those men through the difficult challenges in his life. And he is absolutely doing that. And we are just so grateful that he was able to tell his story to each of us today. At this time, we are going to transition to communion. And you may have taken home one of the pre-packaged communion cups. If you did that, go ahead and grab those. Feel free to pause the video to do that. If you want to use supplies that you have at home, that is great too. And when you're ready, just hit play again and I'll be here waiting for you. But what I would like to do is read from Matthew 26. It says, while they were eating, Jesus took the bread. He gave thanks and broke it and gave it to the disciples, saying, take and eat. This is my body. Then he took the cup, gave thanks, and offered it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now until that day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. We are so blessed to be able to remember what Jesus did each and every week by coming to the communion table. But we also have the opportunity when we do this to think about the fact that we are going to celebrate in this way with Jesus in heaven. I don't know that we think about that on a regular basis, but that is what Jesus just said. And I think that it is an exciting thing for us to look forward to. But as we prepare our hearts this morning, I just invite you to just close your eyes, just be quiet before Jesus. We talk a lot about surrender, about the things that we need to let go of and just give to God. And if there are things that you're holding on to, I just invite you to lay it down. And when you come to the table, realize that you come anew, you come free, and you come ready to remember what Jesus did. Let's close our eyes and go before Jesus. And when you're ready, feel free to partake in the elements.